Hello, good afternoon. Thank you so much for joining us for today's episode of Black Writers Read, which is episode 8 of season 3. My name is Nicole Young Martin, and I serve as a producer and host for the series. Happy New Year! I hope you all got a chance to enjoy some great food, great company, and much needed rest as we transitioned into 2023. I am also sending out nothing but positive vibes to all towards a beautifully fulfilling year. I am very excited to bring to you the very first conversation to kick off the new year. So let's get started. Black Writers Read showcases, celebrates, and honors the words, work, and traditions of Black writers from across the country, across genres, across experiences, and across the African diaspora. Black Writers Read is a behind the scenes conversation into the craft and what it means to create as a Black author in today's society. Since starting the series during the summer of 2020, we've hosted close to 50 authors representing various genres, including children's books, young adult fiction, poetry, urban creative nonfiction, memoir, history, horror, essays, food, and culture from around the globe, including Western Massachusetts, Maryland, Los Angeles, Washington, D.C., upstate New York, New York's Hudson Valley, Vermont, Cambridge, Massachusetts, Chicago, Virginia, Portugal, Costa Rica, and Jacksonville, Florida. Today, we welcome Mbinguni, who is joining us from Fernandina Beach, Florida. We're going to be talking about her book, Looking for Hope. Mbinguni is a natural storyteller born and raised on the barrier island of Fernandina Beach, Florida. She's had dreams of writing professionally for as long as she could remember. An avid reader, she began composing her own narratives as a small child in grade school. Mbinguni's debut novel, which we'll be talking about today, Looking for Hope, was released in January of 2021 and published by New Reads Publications. So we have a birthday. Happy second birthday to Looking for Hope. In this coming-of-age tale, Mbinguni weaves a narrative about Hannah Mouse Maynard and her transformation from a shy, quiet girl into a strong and assertive woman. At 7 years old, Mouse experiences a tragedy that forces her to face the evils of the world and leave behind everything she's ever known. With their home destroyed, Mouse and her father traveled from Maplewood, Georgia to Virginia and Michigan, confronting their past as they move into their future. Mouse encounters women along the way who help her find the strength to survive and thrive against all she's seen. Through these bonds and their fierce protection, Mouse not only finds her voice, but a renewed sense of hope. To learn more about Mbinguni and her work, please visit her website, and I will be sharing with you the exact link as she's reading. Visit Mbinguni.life, and it's spelled MBINGUNI.life. Special thanks to Nikisha Elise Williams, who was on earlier this season, for connecting me with Mbinguni. I wanted to dig a little bit deeper into her work before I brought her on, because when Nikisha and I had a chance to talk about her work, I was just like, wait, what? There's a book like this that exists? Like I love YA. I love engaging with the coming of age tale so much so that I teach it. And there's just so much that I've learned from that genre. That's somebody that's almost in their mid 40s. And I hope that you all will learn a lot from this book as well. So this is a quote from her directly on her work. I've always been passionate about language and captivated by the influence it has on people and the decisions they make in life. I love engaging with the projects I work on, diving headfirst into the research, investigation, and the crafting of stories I feel are worth writing. I am a curious and tenacious author interested in telling the stories of my people with honesty, tenderness, and love. So one of the things I really hope you all do today, because this is her debut novel, this is her first novel, and she's looking at writing others, please encourage her as much as possible. Please buy her book. Please buy it for others. It is such a beautiful read, especially from a debut author. So please do it. So for those who are new to Black Writers Read, here's the format of the show. First, Mbinguni will read an excerpt from Looking for Hope. Then we'll chat about her work. Afterwards, we'll engage in a conversation, and then we'll open it up to Q&A to our viewers if any questions come through. We have viewers joining us from both Facebook and YouTube today. So if you are joining us live today and you have a question, please feel free to include it in the comment section on the platform where you're joining us from today. I will compile the questions and pose them to Mbinguni at an appropriate time. So I'd like to now bring Mbinguni on to the virtual stage. Hello.
Hi, hello, how are you?
I'm good. I have to give you another shout out for the shirt. I want one so bad.
Thank you, thank you.
Yes. So thank you so much for joining us today. And the floor is yours. So have fun.
Okay. The first day of the last week of school proved to be worse than bras and heat. My stomach started cramping like nothing I'd ever felt before. It was so bad, I felt like I would throw up. I asked Mrs. Higgins if I could be excused to the bathroom. I pulled down my panties and almost passed out. There it was. My I'm sorry. There was what I'd spent all of spring and the beginning of summer dreading. My lily white panties were crimson in the crotch. If it hadn't been for Miss Sookie, I wouldn't have known what was happening at all. I had no idea what to do and didn't have any sanitary napkins with me. I wadded up some toilet paper and stuffed it in my panties. I wiped myself clean as best I could, and I prayed Mrs. Higgins would let me go so I could get home before any more damage could be done. I walked back into the classroom as calmly as I could. Thankfully, Mrs. Higgins was not lecturing, and I could walk up to her desk without the whole class staring and being nosy. Mrs. Higgins, I whispered, I need to go home. Home? She looked at me confused. Thankfully, she'd been just as discreet in her tone as I'd been in mine. Yes, ma'am, I just got my monthly for the first time. I need to wash out my underwear, and I don't have any sanitary napkins, I explained quietly. Oh, child, okay, you go on home. I'll have Rudy bring your books and assignments. You drink some hot tea and lie down, she said sweetly. Though Mrs. Higgins had never really been mean to me, she had never been particularly kind either. This was the first time she had ever shown me any sweetness. I turned and walked out of the classroom. I glanced back at Rudy, who had a puzzled look on his face. I nodded, and he nodded in return. He knew he would find out what was going on later. I walked home as quickly as I could. When I got there, Ray was outside pulling dollar weeds. He was preparing the flower beds for new plants that would flourish in the summer heat. My favorites were the plumeria with the bright pinks and yellows. He looked up at me walking past. Mouse, what you doing out of school? He was ready to yell at me. I threw up and Miss Higgins sent me home, I lied. He shook his head and went back to digging. I made a beeline for Miss Sookie's room and knocked on the door. She was playing with her hair and makeup in the mirror of her beautiful pearl white vanity table with the gold embellishments. Hey, baby, what you doing here? You didn't get in trouble down at that school, did you? Miss Sookie's face was drawn up in concern. No, ma'am, I got my monthly, I responded with tears in my eyes. The shock of seeing blood in my panties for the first time had worn off, and now the weight of being a woman was resting on my chest. Miss Sookie gasped and then pulled me into her bosom with the tightest but best hug ever. You just wait right there, she told me. Miss Sookie got up from her vanity, went into the bathroom, and came back with some sanitary napkins. You been cramping? Yes, ma'am. My stomach hurts real bad. Okay, let's go upstairs and get you all cleaned up. Miss Sookie is going to show you how to take care of yourself. I'm going to fix you right on up. How does that sound? I nodded. Go grab some clean underwear and meet me in the bathroom, she instructed as she walked me to the bottom of the stairs. A few moments later, Miss Sookie met me in the bathroom. She started running hot water in the tub, then poured some white stuff that looked like sugar into the water. Okay, while that's running, I want you to take off your panties. We need to rinse the blood out in cold water while it's still fresh, she told me. I took off my panties and threw the soiled toilet paper in the toilet and flushed. I was so ashamed of the mess I'd made. I'd wadded up the panties before passing them to Miss Sookie. Mouse, you ain't got to be embarrassed about your monthly, especially not around women folk. It's natural. You a woman now. I know this got to be hard without your mama, so I'll do my best to teach you what she would want you to know, she said lovingly. Miss Sookie rinsed my panties out in the sink with cold water. She sprinkled some soap shavings onto them and scrubbed the two sides together until they were almost as white as when my father bought them. Since your daddy used this bathroom, I'll take these down in my bathroom to dry, she said, with a nod while putting some strange looking leaves into the warm bath water and turning off the spigot. I put some Epsom salt in that water, and these here are peppermint leaves. This is an old trick my mama taught me that will soothe that stomach pain you got, she shared. I watched her stir the water as if she was a witch hovering over her cauldron of brew. Okay, Mouse, get in and soak in that water until I come back for you. I sat in the tub of hot water feeling like stewed chicken. Eventually, the water began to cool, and I could feel that the cramping had eased. I was almost asleep when Miss Sookie tapped on the door and told me I could get out. Miss Sookie showed me how to place the sanitary napkin into my clean underwear. She gave me a nice soft nightgown to put on and walked me to the bedroom. The nightgown swallowed me up, but it was so soft I didn't care. I told your daddy that you're sick and not to worry. Me and the girls are going to take care of you. If you don't feel well enough to go to school tomorrow, you can stay home, Miss Sookie informed me. She tucked me in and told me that Mrs. Jameson would be in a bit. I was beginning to think that becoming a woman wasn't going to be so bad after all. There was a tap at the door a few moments later, and in came Sonny. You got your monthly? She exclaimed. Miss Sookie told you, I yelled. Only because she's excited. She thinks it's a special thing. What do you think? I asked in earnest. I think it's a curse. Just stay away from menfolk. Sonny kissed me on my forehead before leaving. Mrs. Jameson came in with some lavender tea and butter cookies soon after Sonny left. Butter cookies were my favorite. They were shaped like flowers and had holes in the centers. I liked to put it on my finger and eat my way around the cookie until it was gone. Mrs. Jameson set the tea and cookies on the side table. How you feeling, sweet girl? Miss Jameson asked. I'm okay, I croaked out as dramatically as I could. I hope that would earn me some more butter cookies. Mrs. Jameson rubbed my belly and looked at me with a sweet, understanding smile. Okay, I'll be back to check on you in a bit, and I'll bring your dinner up when it's ready. You drink your tea and then try to take a nap. When you wake up, you should feel a whole heck of a lot better. I think that's where I'll stop.
I'm glad that you read that particular section because it really highlights why this book is so important. The rituals of becoming a woman, I feel like a lot of fiction doesn't touch upon, but it needs to be it needs to be discussed. And I love like the whole like beautiful mentoring and shepherding that happened in that moment too. So thank you for choosing that particular section.
That's one of my favorite sections, and I was getting a little long-winded. So there's a section right after that I really wanted to get to, but I felt like it was getting long-winded.
This is why people should buy the book.
Right. But I specifically chose that part of that process in becoming a woman because she has lost her mother. And going through that without a mother can be traumatic. And so I wanted to highlight that for this particular character.
Yeah, thank you so much for doing that. So I'm going to start off the conversation with what brings us together today. Can you share with us the origin story for Looking for Hope, which is your debut novel, and why the story right now? And then how did you come up with the title?
So the origin story, I've always known that I wanted to write, but I've also always been, I don't want to say afraid of it, but I didn't really, I guess, think that I could do it. And so Mouse, the main character, who is 6.5 when the book starts, showed herself to me. I actually saw her, and I saw her clothing, so I knew from the clothing that her character was from the late 1950s, early 60s. And so that's how the book was born. The characters kind of started showing themselves to me. Why now was just kind of the timing of how it all happened. I started this book so long ago, but it took me many years to feel comfortable, to believe in my gift as a writer, to find mentors that were willing to pour into me, who believed in my work. And so it kind of just, the way that it came together definitely was the hand of God and divine, placing people in my life and in my path that propelled me into getting it done. Because if I had not come across the people that I came across during that journey, this story probably would not still be out in the world, or would not be out in the world. In terms of the title, Hope is one of the characters. So it's kind of a double entendre. That's the main character's mother, who she loses very early in the book, tragically. And so.
Yeah. And thank you again for slipping in the like the tragedy that does happen. Because I'm someone, I lost my mom, would be considered young. I was in my 30s, but it's that whole like, how do you approach a text in your life? Because this was one of the things I was thinking about for myself when reading it. Approach a text when you're confronted with something like that dramatic of a transition in your life, and to have a young girl go through it. And sad but ironically, one of my closest friends lost her mom at around the same age as well, and I remember her telling me about, like, how do you do all of these rituals of becoming yourself, because the person who typically would lead you through that was not there. And then also too, this leads into the next question, like setting this, character within the world of a pivotal moment in the African American civil rights movement in the late 50s and early 60s.
Mm-hmm.
Why that particular time period? And then how much do you cite from actual events in the story?
So the particular time period, I will say I am a writer who I try very hard to be led by my characters. Part of my process when I'm sitting down to write is to meditate and to pray, and I'm asked to be used as a vessel. So while it's impossible for a human and an author to totally disappear from the book, I want my characters to lead the story, because it's not my story, it's their story. And so Mouse was the one who said it was in the 50s and the 60s. When she revealed herself to me, I saw the collar of her shirt and her shoes. And I said, oh, I was born in 76. So, but I had a frame of reference from the elders around me to know what was worn during that time, how that looked. So when I saw her, I knew. I said, oh, she's in the 1950s, 1960s. So that is how the time was actually selected. In terms of including what was happening in the era, I do use that to kind of help, because I don't think I ever directly say what year it is. And so those are things that I use to kind of give the reader reference to what time it is. I think I mentioned integration of schools. What was the book that I mentioned? Oh goodness, I can't think of the name of it. I mentioned radio shows from that era, books, To Kill a Mockingbird. So things like that I used to definitely make the reader feel what era they were in. But that wasn't, there's a character in the story where kind of you need to understand the dynamics of race, but that's not a big part of the book.
Yeah, and that's another reason why this book is so important, is because it really forces the reader to follow the journey of Mouse. Because I feel like if this were more historical fiction, where you're definitely obvious about the time period, we're going to project this whole journey based off of what we know on that time period on to the character. But at the same time, I like that you alluded to the time period through like cultural artifacts, because just imagining a young person becoming and affirming within themselves in this like time of turmoil, I feel like could speak to a lot of different readers, to experience a protagonist who is coming into her own in a time where it was like, is it really okay to be black? And is that a dog? No, you're fine. I'm surprised my 3 haven't gone off yet.
Hold on 1 second.
Yeah. Yeah, because typically for people who are joining us, y'all usually hear my chorus of 3, and my chorus of 3 is quiet right now. So I'm like, what? Where are they and what are they doing?
Okay, I was trying to wait for him to calm down. I don't know if he heard something. I'm sorry about that.
Oh, you're totally okay. Like I said, on other episodes, my chorus of dogs are typically barking in the background. So I'm just like, I'm surprised they're quiet and not going off right now.
So one of the things I wanted to say in talking about the time and racism and that kind of thing, I also wanted, my heart lies with writing books that are really about us. And so largely most of the book, there's nothing but Black characters. There's a small section where we are introduced to a white family, but again, they don't play a huge part in the book. They are a tool for Mouse to learn a couple of lessons, but they don't really play a huge part in the book. And that's because I want, the beauty of our community to come through in anything that I write. So
Cool. So Hannah, Mouse Maynard, which I'll refer to her as Mouse from this point on, is 7. Excuse me. As my coughing fit, for those who have been following me this season, post COVID, still lives with me. And I would love to know, why is she, again, like you did speak to, Mouse did come to you, but 7 is such excuse me, a specific age. It's like this world of discovery. They're like, I am open to all possibilities at this age. So what possibilities do you offer to Mouse, your readers, in the coming of age genre through Mouse at 7 years old?
I wanted, Mouse comes from a very closed and protected, our communities growing up, especially before technology, were very close-knit, closed. Everybody the neighborhood watched out for kids. So she was very naive because she'd been very protected. And so I think one of the biggest things about Mouse throughout the book until she gets quite a bit older is her innocence. And so there's a section of the book after the tragedy happens, she's traveling. They're going from place to place. And in one of the locations, the boarding house she and her father end up at is actually a brothel. And in her innocence, she's not 7 when this happens. She's a little bit older, but in her innocence, she doesn't understand what's going on there. So when she hears the word entertain, she interprets that as all of these girls in this brothel have some type of skill. They can sing, they can dance, maybe they can juggle.
I mean, maybe they can juggle and sing, and yeah.
So I enjoyed, that's one of the reasons Mouse, the character, is so near and dear to my heart. I enjoyed playing with that innocence in trying to put myself in the shoes of a 7-year-old child trying to understand the world around her. So I enjoyed that part of it.
And it takes me back to how I was at 7. I grew up as an only child until I was like 15. And so I was always around adults and in adult conversations. And I was that kid. And I was very fortunate that my parents were like, you're not going to be the child that's seen and not heard. Like, I was always a part of conversations. And to go back to when I was like 6 through 9, just what I learned about the world, being able to be exposed in that way, as opposed to being sheltered. Because I feel like you and I are probably of that generation before social media, where you're forced to be encountered with a lot of things without a lot of shepherding and mentoring through that. So I'm of a generation where, and I'm like 43, I almost made myself 44, where it's like my parents exposed me to things, but sheltered me in the way in that they're like, okay, we're going to talk you through what these things are. And I was, so happy to see that Mouse was exposed to those worlds, because I feel like it grounds her in a more sense of self, rather than being the sheltered type, but also to being the one who has to be accosted with these things without having someone around for guidance, if that makes sense at all.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And I also, even though she doesn't have her mother, she does develop these relationships where she still has kind of people looking out for her and people concerned about what's happening to her. And that was something that I thought was, once I went through the process and looked back at it, I thought was very beautiful, because, we Black women, we are something. For one, I just think we're magical. So
yes!
I just think we are the most magical things walking this earth.
Yes.
But all women to some degree, because women are programmed for mothering. But Black women specifically, we tend to see a child and know there is a need, and we are going to, you know what I'm saying, protect or
Yep.
guide or grab on them and love on them, something. And so that was beautiful to me when I looked back at the book and saw how that kind of happened throughout the book.
Yeah, so I'm going to skip around questions. So the question that I'm asked now is going to the other women in the book
Okay.
that lead her through her journey. So throughout Looking for Hope, women lead Mouse through the story. Why women as these mentors? And then thinking about this question, who is your ideal reader and why?
Women, I think number one, because again, Black women, and I've seen that happen in my life. Like the women in my life from beginning to now have been just very strong women, very and I don't mean strength in terms of they went through all this stuff and survived. I mean that's part of it, but when I say strong, I am saying with resolve and with um a spirit of doing things in excellence. And I grew up watching women really operate in excellence in everything they did. And so I wanted to pass that on to Mouse, I think. And again, I didn't really, Miss Sookie was a character that was revealed to me. I saw Miss Sookie and I immediately knew who she was, what she did. And so that just kind of happened, but I'm glad it happened because it's kind of a reflection of my life. While I think, many people will enjoy reading this book, I definitely think it's number one, specifically for the Black community. But number two, I really think Black women will resonate with this, especially of a certain age group who understand that particular time frame. So I think that's kind of who this book is really for.
Nice. So the story travels through Georgia, Virginia, and Michigan.
Mhm.
And ironically, I'm originally from Michigan. So
Oh,
that was really nice. Yeah, I'm originally from Detroit. So
okay.
why these particular places and what would the reader experience about these places through your words and Mouse's story?
So the only place that was specific, I did want them to start in the South. And so that's why I chose Georgia. The other places was about the running and about the getting
Mm,
away from what had happened. So it wasn't necessarily, I kind of was like, okay, where can they go? I kind of looked at the map and said, well, where are they going? Why? So I just knew number one, it was north. They were running from the South. They were running from what happened. And so that's why the places came into play. I believe they're all fake names in a
mhm,
sense. Like we have a Edenville. That was me paying homage to Eatonville. I
mhm.
lived in Orlando for many, many years and would go to the Zora Neale Festival there. So
Oh wow.
yeah, so uh, that was a kind of a nod to Zora Neale Hurston. And then I think there is one of the other towns is close to a town that I grew up near. The name of it, rather, is close to a town that I grew up in. So there are a lot of places in the book, not just the locations, where I kind of give a nod to different things. Like there's a deuce and a quarter in the book. My grandfather owned a deuce and a quarter, so it was and he
Wow.
passed while I was writing this book, and so um, there were a lot of like little nods along the way. In terms of the character in these places, really it's just a reflection of the time. They were really kind of just used. I don't really get into, I think, location specifically. I think I described the houses in that first stop they make so that they've kind of transitioned from the South, because these houses have basements and stuff like that, which you don't typically
Mm,
find in the South. Um, So really, it was just about, like I said, the running. That's why the places were important, in the fact that she was having to be snatched from these locations and people that she loved, had grown to love in each of these settings, and to go further away from her home and what she knew. So that was kind of the role that played.
nice. As the story evolves, we see Mouse become more assertive and empowered. Why is it important to frame a protagonist's journey in this way, especially for a girl so young? And what would you like your readers to learn from this type of narrative?
Well, again, because of the tragedy that happens, and it's kind of hard to talk about it because you don't want to ruin it for readers.
Right.
There's a period of time where Mouse does not speak at all. She was already a quiet child. That's why she had the nickname Mouse. And that's kind of explained in the book. But this tragedy happens, and it's so traumatic for this child that she stops speaking altogether. So to see her go from not speaking at all to ultimately who she is in the end of the book, I thought that was important because there are two main themes in the book to me. One of which is love, the power of love, and how that can help to heal. And the other is that tragedy does not have to define you. We all have things that happen in our lives that are traumatic, that change you to the core of who you are. I remember when when my grandmother passed, that was like almost devastated me, because I had never had anyone that close to me die. My grandparents raised me. So in essence, that was like losing a mother. Thankfully, my mother is still here and we are close. But, my grandmother raised me. So that was like my earliest years, the person who took care of me. And so to lose her was very devastating. And it changes you. It does something to the inside of you. And it was almost like I felt like I didn't have an anchor because she was my anchor. So when she was gone, I kind of felt like I was just out here in the world. So to see this child go through something so traumatic and to become the woman that she is, I think, number one, definitely speaks to our spirit. And I just thought that was important. I am a firm believer that love is the most powerful force in the universe. Mm-hmm. And so I wanted that to be translated in the book, and I hope that it was.
Wow, and I didn't realize you experienced so much loss, like deep loss in your life. I'm so sorry.
Thank you. It shapes who you are, so it's all a part of the journey.
It does. And actually, because I lost both of my parents in a short period of time in the mid 2010s, and I noticed how I see the world, how I write, and how I tell stories has significantly evolved because it's my anchors are gone. So it's like you become your own anchor, and it's just like, okay, how do you look at the world now? And I saw a lot of that through Mouse. It's like, how do you become your own anchor? Because a pivotal figure for you is gone.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so this leads to the next question. I remember you did mention your grandfather passed while you were writing this book. Mm-hmm. When did you discover your gift as a writer? What would you like for your contribution to the literary canon to be? And what goals do you have for yourself as a cultural contributor?
Okay. Wait, go back to the first question.
I tend to combine a lot of stuff. I can break this up. When did you discover your gift as a writer?
Okay. I have been writing for as long as I can remember. My grandmother was an educator, so I started reading very early. And I remember being in middle school and reading Toni Morrison's The Bluest Eye. And that's when
how old were you?
I was in middle school because I started reading early, and I wanted to read everything. Because with my grandparents raising me, I was the only child in the house. So reading was my companionship. And I would escape into these different worlds. So I was in middle school when I read the Bluest Eye, and I read that book, and I just thought, I want to do this. I want to, whatever she just did, I want to do that. So I've been writing for a very long time. I still have stuff that I wrote in 6th grade. A sci-fi story, as a matter of fact, that I wrote in 6th grade, which I read it sometimes and chuckle. So I've been writing for a very long
time. What would you like for your contribution to the literary canon to be?
I want to contribute to the world seeing us as multifaceted. We are such an amazing people to me. I don't care what anybody else thinks. I just think we are so amazing, and we get reduced down. I won't say reduced. We get marginalized a lot of times in certain roles for everybody else.
Yes.
And I think I'm so in love with some of the things that are coming out now, because with the shift in what's happening in cinema and television, we're starting to tell different stories and being able to see ourselves in different ways. So like the Lovecraft Country, the Watchmen, the like all these different things that are happening, the Insecures, you're starting to get to see more sides of us as a people. And so I want to contribute to that, to, even though there's tragedy in this book, I think there's a lot of other things as well. There's resilience, there's love, there's community. So I want us to really be able to show all of that to the world.
Yeah, and you also mentioned, especially with Insecure, you mentioned platforms that not only have us on camera, but behind the camera
And
and the
camera.
creatives as well. And this
Mhm.
is something that I'm glad that we really get to experience. Not only are we of the story, we are creating our own stories as well. And then also too, like with Issa Rae, creating platforms for emerging Black creatives to then pivot as well. So I
Yeah.
love that we exist in this moment right now.
I do too. Like watching, anybody that was a fan of Queen Sugar, when you watch at the end and they talk about Ava's, really push to get only women directors. Like I just love that we're pushing and trying to change the landscape. And I think for so long our stories have been told from a vantage point that was not ours. And
Yes.
so I definitely appreciate us getting into these spaces and these positions where we can start to tell our own stories.
Yeah,
And
and not only tell our yeah, and not only tell our own stories, but tell our stories for our audiences. Because I also believe that there's so many things in media that feature Black characters where they were not written for us, too.
right, right. I agree.
Um, yeah. Our environments and communities can inform our creative practice. How much has everything you've experienced, including places you've lived, any mentors or loved ones, and your surrounding informed your writing and literary voice?
Oh, that's it. That's everything to my voice. I mean, because I have been very fortunate. I don't make any, what's the word I want to use? I know that I have been blessed. I've been surrounded by people, not just women, but people who really have set a high bar. Like I said, my grandmother was an educator. My grandfather worked for the railroad for many, many years. He had like an elementary school education, couldn't read or write, but was smart as a whip. You know what I'm saying? So I saw so many different things, and for some reason just really fell in love with my community. And I know that influences who I am as a writer, and that is why I'm so passionate about writing stories about us that really show the breadth of who we are. And so I definitely attribute all of that to mentors. Even though like I said, my grandfather couldn't read or write, he was still a storyteller. My grandfather would tell a story. He'd like to cook raccoon. We say coon in the country.
Yes, yep. Coon in the South. Yes.
And he would often tell a story about going out in the woods to trap a coon and having to fight with this coon to trap it. So he was a storyteller. He just couldn't actually read or write it. And, my grandmother would take me to the library and check out books. And I also have an affinity for television and film. And that was something we would do. I would crawl up in the bed with her and we'd watch old black and white movies. And she had her TV shows that she watched. So I was immersed in this world of storytelling, and that's kind of just what I gravitated to. So I definitely attribute, my whatever as a writer, gifts, whatever, to the people that I came up around.
Oh, I'm just imagining a little Mbinguni sitting there with her grandmother tucked in with a nice little comforter, watching probably Imitation of Life.
Yes, that was one of them. Yeah. Yep. So that's what we do. I still now, when I want to feel close to her, I'll either cook or I'll watch an old black and white movie.
What is your favorite black and white movie that you watched with your grandmother?
There was one called The Heiress. Um,
Oh,
I don't think most people probably have heard of that one,
I
but
haven't heard of it.
the name is The Heiress, and it's about this woman who is she's not a pretty woman. Her father has a lot of money, and this guy tries to woo her, and he's handsome, and everybody's looking like, girl, don't trust him. But of course, she falls head over heels, and you spend the movie trying to figure out, does he really love her, or is he trying to get her fortune? And then it's revealed. So it's I still watch that movie from time to time.
Nice. I need to look for it because one of the things that I love about older black and white movies, because I was looking at clips about Joan Crawford yesterday, just the acting,
Mhm.
and also too the thing I appreciated were the budgets. It's like how much they can do with what, whereas now a lot of things are CGI, but the budgets are still really high because
Right.
you're paying stars. But back then it's like you had your budgets were huge because of the costumes and like renting sets and going to actual places as opposed to using a green screen to take
Mhm.
people there. So there was some magic in films from back in the day that I love.
I love the acting, but what I have also found is the dialogue was very smart back then.
Yeah.
It was really smart. So that's what I typically enjoy too about old black and white movies.
Nice. So I have a couple of questions before we wrap up today. And those who are joining us, excuse me, if you have any questions for Mbinguni, please feel free to put them in the comment section, excuse me, of the platform that you're joining us from today. So Looking for Hope was published by New Reads Publications. Can you talk about that relationship? How did it start and why them as the publisher for your debut novel?
So I went through the whole process of writing the book without thinking a tap about how this book was going to get out into the world. And so when I had finished the first pass, because it ended up not being finished at this point, but I finished the first pass, and one of my mentors, Suzette D. Harrison, started asking me all these questions about publishing. And I got overwhelmed, and I was like, whoa, 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 whoa. Like, I just want to write. What is all of this stuff you're asking me? So I was not very educated about the publishing process. And once she asked me all those questions, I was like, oh no, I don't want to be in charge of that. I sent out some query letters, got some interest in the book, but ultimately had not found like an agent or a publishing house that wanted to do the book. And so, in the midst of trying to figure out how I was going to get this book out, my aunt mentioned to me that Nikisha Williams, who is the owner of New Reads Publications, that she was doing a talk at the local library
Oh,
and about publishing. So I went, and during that talk, she revealed that she had a publishing company, and I was like, "Ding, ding, ding!" Like, okay. So, well, one thing about Nikisha, she's not going to just automatically publish. She has to believe in your work. And so she asked me to send her a portion of the book. I did, and she agreed to publish it. And so that's how that relationship was born. And it definitely was good because that was part of the process of refining the book. She, is an Emmy Award winning news journalist. And
yeah.
so she's a writer. So she began going through and leaving notes. And so that helped me refine the book and get it to what it was when it became published. So,
Yeah, and I'm so glad that you have that nurturing relationship, which Nikisha, who she was on earlier this season to talk about her book, Mardi Gras Indians, she also has the podcast Black in Publishing. So please make sure
Black and
to check that
published.
out. Yes, Black and Published. Thank you. Such amazing like support for the community. And then lastly, my last question for you is what is next for you and how can the Black Writers Read community support you on this journey?
I am working on book 2. So I'm playing with 2 different books. So I'm not sure which one is going to get finished first, but I will say for those who have read the book, one of the characters from Looking from Hope is definitely getting a spinoff. So And I also write in other forums, but I don't write under Mbinguni in those forums. I write under my birth name, which is Celestial Homes. So just, going out, consuming my work, and definitely purchasing Looking for Hope and sharing it with others, telling others to read it, and keeping up and seeing when this next book comes out, because you're going to be just as surprised as me.
Yes! And I hope this next book comes out sooner rather than later. So I
Me
hope that
too.
you have tons of
I've
writing
vowed that I won't
time.
let it take 14 years.
Yes!
I
I hope that the characters speak to you whenever you sit down to write. I hope that they lead you and your pen or your computer, however you jot it down, your notes, that they get you to the finished product a lot faster.
Thank you. Thank you. I received that because I need it right now. I've been fighting with them.
Yes!
It's,
Be like, we're
it's
gonna be in this boxing
wrestling
match.
going on in here.
Yes, be like, what are y'all doing? Like, why? What is the what? Be like, we gonna fight today. Be like, can you please be here?
And then they come in and have the nerve to want to be bossy. Like,
Yeah. Wow.
yeah, it's
I'm
fun.
like,
I enjoy it.
yeah. Because I'm like, you're facilitating their like, if it weren't for you putting them on the page, their story won't get out there. So it's just like y'all have to be in dialogue with one another to like make it happen.
Right. So
Yes.
it's cool though. I enjoy it, and I remember reading an article because I kind of thought, oh, maybe I'm a little bit crazy that my characters like show up to me, and then I read an article where another author was being interviewed, and they said that happened to them too. So I said, okay, I guess it's an author thing. Um, so I've just reconciled that these people are gonna live in my head until I write their stories. Once I write their story, they get out, they leave, and they leave me alone. So.
But do you think Mouse is going to come back when she's like an adult and be like, hey?
So I will say this: her story is done. Like we're not going to
Mm.
revisit her, but she does make an appearance in the book for the spinoff as an
Nice.
adult.
Oh, cool.
Mhm.
Yes. So everyone, please be sure to purchase Looking for Hope. It's available for purchase via Amazon and BarnesandNoble.com. Also, please find Benguni online. She's at www.benguni.life, and that is Mbinguni.life. So, Benguni, thank you so much for joining us today. I'm going to wrap up a couple of things and then give everybody their Saturday back. So, thank you so
Thank you
much.
for having me. This was fun.
Yay! Thank you so much. So I will be back on Saturday, January 21st with Lisa Pegram. You may recognize her name as she's with the literary publicity company Levy Break Lit and publisher Jaded Ibis Press. Lisa has been an extremely generous supporter of Black Writers Read for quite some time, as she's assisted us with booking many of our guests, especially guests from season 3. She's an award-winning writer herself, and I am excited to finally get a chance to chat with Lisa about her work. And it's around her birthday, so I hope that you all join us here. So find me and more about Black Writers Read online at my website, which is NicoleMYoung.com. Be sure to subscribe to the YouTube channel to keep up with episodes of both Black Writers Read and my other projects. Also, be sure to subscribe to the audio podcast, which is available on Apple Podcasts, iHeartRadio, Spotify, Google Podcasts, and Amazon Music. Essentially, I take the audio from our episodes and plug them in there as well for accessibility purposes. So thanks to everyone for spending your afternoon with us, and more importantly, for ensuring that Black authors continue to matter. I will see you in a couple of weeks. Thanks so much.